it is important to first talk about the more general epistemological foundations of the social sciences. And in this respect, three notions are very important. The first one is ontology, the study of being, which is concerned with the question, what exists? Is there a transcendental world? How came our world about? Where is it going? This is a realm of general philosophy, religion, diverse worldviews, each claiming some absolute truth, which, however, often are conflicting or not compatible. So, in my view, I think we only can agree to disagree. The second notion is epistemology, the theory of science. This addresses the questions, what can we know? What are the foundations of scientific knowledge? How can we be sure about our insights? What evidence do we have? Again, there are many controversies in these respects, but within certain schools of thought and the respective scientific disciplines, some agreements can be found. The third notion, finally, is methodology, which is the reflection about and the knowledge of procedures and tools in science, which answers the question, how do we acquire scientific knowledge? How reliable and valid are our tools and techniques? How can we be sure of the evidence? How can these insights be intersubjectively, which means among scientists in a particular field, be transmitted and recognized, accepted? The social sciences deal with human beings and their interactions, and they differ in a number of important respects from the natural sciences, which are dealing with dead objects, inanimate objects, and nature. And the social sciences and all the humanities and all the sciences dealing with human beings deal with three different dimensions. One is the object dimension, which means we deal with concrete objects like bodies or social structures, political institutions. So in this respect, we have some tangible objects we deal with. There is a second dimension, namely the subject dimension, and this deals with our perceptions of the world, how we see the world, our subjective sentiments and beliefs. And thirdly, there is also, for all human sciences, a normative dimension. What is a good political order? How should human beings behave? What are certain ethical or normative principles of human life? And so these three different dimensions are important to distinguish, like in medicine between anatomy and psychology, or even in our computer world, we distinguish between what we call hardware, the objects, and software, which is more the, if you wish, subjective side, more not so easily recognized side of things. And in all our human relations, we have to acknowledge that there is also a normative side to it. And this is important for all the social sciences, and in this respect, we really deal with these dimensions in a different way. And in our social sciences, some approaches emphasize more one dimension and others emphasize another dimension. So, for example, so-called historical materialist approaches or Marxist approaches, at least in a more orthodox sense of Marxism. They base their assumptions and their arguments on the object dimension. These, in Marxist theory, are the basics of the economic system, the modes of production, and from these are derived other dimensions. The subjective dimension, the consciousness of people. So workers are based in their situation on their place in the mode of production, but then their subjective perception, their consciousness, is in an orthodox Marxist sense largely determined by this. In the social sciences, you also have an approach which is based more on the subjective dimension. For example, the behavioralist approach in social science and in political science tries to understand why people perceive of certain situations in a particular way, how they relate this to their own subjective life situation, how then their experiences, their subjective experiences, is determining their behavior and their reactions to ordinary daily situations. But in addition to these both dimensions, there is a third approach which is based on the normative dimension, which means already back in classical philosophy, if you go back to Plato and others, but also in more or less contemporary social philosophy and political science, you have persons like Leo Strauss in the United States, who died a few years ago, or presently Jürgen Habermas in Germany, who are mainly concerned from a social philosophy point of view with standards of ethical, normative behavior for human beings. And these three dimensions are relevant for all of our social sciences, and this is the first major distinction we have between the social sciences and the natural sciences.